أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أما بعد. Mustafa Bey, I want to pick back up on where I left off in my last video because apparently my mic went dead. And so I left a few listeners hanging. And so I want to reiterate, recap, and continue therefrom. So my contention in the video was we're being bound by certain what we call adhesion contracts, or what's called adhesion contracts in law, right? The way these contracts have been uh, um, achieved, right, has been through the devices of what I said was fraud, conspiracy, and conversion. So first, beginning with fraud, we want to draw upon fraud from its legal perspective and what that entails, right? So fraud from the legal perspective is the intentional perversion of the truth to induce another person into reliance upon it, to part with a valuable thing or a legal right. It constitutes all deceitful practices, willful devices, or concealments, right? When it says willful devices, just think about that as policies, right? Or concealments that cause injury or gain an unconscientious advantage, right? So fraud also does not necessitate minimum contacts. What does that mean? That means you don't have to be in the vicinity of the person to be defrauded by them. It does not necessitate contracts at all. Contacts and minimum contacts go hand in hand because in law, minimum contacts is usually an agreement, a contract. So, but you can be in separate states across the country or international and have a contract, right? So those two things does not necessitate a contract at all because fraud is a tort. Fraud is an injury. Fraud is an attack, an assault, a trespass upon your civil rights. Uh, 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 you've been wronged in some type of way, and it can exist independently of a written or perceived agreement. So that's what I meant by fraud. By conspiracy is simply when two or more uh, get together to do something that's unlawful, like practice fraud. Okay. Conversion is converting your status, your property, your estate, or taking you out of your proper person, right? And that was achieved as well. And we're going to talk about that. Uh, 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 and I would advise one to look at my video, 14th Amendment, and focus because that's when I really go in on a little more in depth on the 14th Amendment. And so I also mentioned that America was established as a republic. So it was granted, or the people were granted a Republican form of government. A Republican form of government simply means that it was popular sovereignty of the people for the people and by the people, and that the government was foreign to them, and that the government only concerned itself with those rights that the private man had. And that's why the government was constituted to assure and enforce and protect those private rights. Um, and so the Republican form of government is what they fought the British for and established, right? And it meant that the government didn't have any jurisdictional lawful authority into your private matters, your private affairs, right? As opposed to now, how when you go and you sign something that asks you a bunch of personal questions and you willingly give up all this personal information, that personal information is data that is sold on the black market. That information is actually your estate in America. Those are assets. Those are things that they put on forms and they make money off of. Okay, so that's why data information, buying and selling is so popular and so central to what's going on in this digital age. So the democracy is a form and a system, right? Basically, the democracy in America, right, is in the form of your participation in the political process. That's where your opinion, supposed to, get some type of valid consideration, right? So, the democratic system is the suffrage and so on and so forth, right? But the form is Republican, right? And I'm not talking about Republican Party or Democratic Party because both of those have been commandeered, right? Um, so I talked about um, the original 13th Amendment. The original 13th Amendment was 1812, and in the original 13th Amendment, it prohibited what's called titles of nobility. Titles of nobility, that particular 13th Amendment is in large part to has gone missing. The theories that are out there is, it was came up missing during the War of 1812 when the British burnt down the White House, and some people even suggest that they came actually looking for that particular amendment because it proposed problems to their agenda and the agreements that they had with their particular agents and instrumentalities, and that would be central to how they achieve their goal. Um, I'll come back to that. Um, so remember, titles of nobility are things that are granted from a foreign power, king, monarch, right? Gives you a particular, calls you a duke or earl or prince or whatever, even ceremoniously, that was a violation of the Constitution. I mentioned how when Trump went to Israel, they gave him some type of title, and that was pretty much a violation of the Constitution. So Titles of Nobility Amendment disappears in 1812. We have the war, what's called the Civil War, that is in American mythology or American history. It's taught that the Civil War was fought over slavery or to abolish slavery. That's not actual factual. That's partially factual, right? But not actual factual because the Union, the northern states, were in league with the banking powers of the world. Why do I say that? Because Alexander Hamilton told Thomas Jefferson that the United States had to take on debts to get credit in the world of finance and banking. It was against Jefferson's policy and his idea, but they end up doing it. Hamilton's argument ends up winning over because of those agencies and instrumentalities I was talking about who were in line with banking powers. So that jeopardized the republic, right? And the Union was beholden to the bank because it took out these loans and it owed these creditors and so on and so forth. And when the southern states decided they don't want to play ball and they separate from the Union, 11, I believe, states, right? That's a significant problem because the agricultural states was where the money was being generated in the United States of America, and the northern states were more financial institutions and so on and so forth, going towards other forms of economic growth. So when the Civil War, right before the Civil War, the Congress used the 11 states that end up succeeding from the Union. They used those people's votes to pass the 13th Amendment, the new 13th Amendment, that was the abolishment of slavery. Okay. You have to ask yourself why, when they abolished slavery, didn't they just put the provisions in there to include the formerly enslaved as now included within the body politic, giving full suffrage, full citizenship, et cetera, didn't do that. So that left a door open. You got to free people without a status, right? And now there's no link between them and the government because they're free people. They're free to do what they want to do. They can establish their own body politic. They can look out and trying to carve out a state for themselves if they choose to do. But quickly, the banking powers and their counterparts, the lawyers, constructed a device called the 14th Amendment. They rushed it through the 14th Amendment. Uh, 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 the big hula-dee focus was, now you can't discriminate against black people. You can't over their race, creed, condition of formerly being a slave, et cetera, right? And that's what most people get stuck on. However, there's what's called the incorporation clause in this 14th Amendment that says that the states, no one can question the monetary policies of the federal government. And so, hook, line, and sinker went the servitude of the nation. Now, that's directly in relief with the banking powers for all who don't know. Um, And so I'm gonna stop right there because I don't want this video to be too long, take too long to upload. This is just part one. So I'm gonna like to